everyone. My name is Deanna Joseph, and I just want to thank you for being here today. I thought I would talk today about authenticity and telling our true stories. Some of my friends and I have been discussing this at length for a couple of years now because I know for myself the reason I wouldn't be authentic is because I'm going to worry about what somebody else thinks, right? Like I can't handle the judgments that would come at me because of that. And so authentic living is something we've been supporting each other in this and trying to do this all together. So I've seen like firsthand really what the challenges are of authentic living. It can be a big challenge, right? It's when we have to worry about what other people think. So I was thinking about back in the early 90s when I went to a school for holistic healing, and I met so many interesting people. And I discovered at that time that here in the Inland Empire, there are a lot of New Age groups, right? And metaphysics groups. And I loved being part of these groups, but they were all like so advanced that I couldn't really understand what they were talking about. Like when people would talk about, purposefully traveling out of body, okay? Or going into meditation and having these experiences, these beings of light would like come and overwhelm them with these amazing feelings. I was like, I don't get it. I just don't get it. I remember one time this guy, he's like, well, of course you've read The Nature of Personal Reality by Jane Roberts. And I was like, oh yeah, of course I have. And then I had to run out, because there was no Amazon.com back then. I had to run out and find this book so I could read it so I wouldn't be a big fat liar. But that's just how inferior I felt. Like I couldn't even admit that I hadn't read a book that they saw as like an amazing New Agey book. So I struggled with some of that for a while. Now, flash forward to the year 2000. It's summertime and my son is 3 years old. My daughter is 1. And we have a client I have a client come over to the house, apartment. Actually, we were living in an apartment at the time. Well, my son, who was really excited to have somebody come over, he rushes over to the table and there's a watermelon sitting there. He picks up the watermelon and holds it over his head to show her how strong he is, right? And she's all impressed and I'm like, oh, Adam, you're such a big boy, right? And then he drops the watermelon on the rug in the dining room. And I'm like, who puts a rug in a dining room anyway? Or carpeting, right? The dining room was carpeted. So we cleaned it up. And I just went on to see my client and we just did our thing and then she left. I didn't think about it again. But then she came back a couple of weeks and she was like, Deanna, I was thinking about that last time I saw you. And I was thinking it was like part of our session or something, right? She's like, when Adam dropped the watermelon. I was like, yeah, kids, right? And she says, you're just such an earth mama. And I am just striving to be that, but it's really hard. And you're always so patient and loving and you just make it look really, really easy. And I said, because that's not how my life was, right? I said, I'll tell you what, the next time I'm ready to have a breakdown and I'm hiding in my bathroom sobbing, eating a plate of brownies, I'll call you, okay? And that could very well be later this afternoon. And we just laughed about it. She left. But I started thinking later on, I'm like, she thought that I'm an earth mama based on spending a little bit of time with me. And then I started thinking about the spiritual groups where I felt inferior. And I thought I was basing my ideas of inferiority on spending a few minutes, a couple of hours a week with people. And maybe I wasn't seeing the whole story either. Right? Maybe they actually did struggle in their lives. Maybe they did actually have obstacles to overcome, right? That maybe just because they learned how to have an out-of-body experience, it didn't mean that every other corner of their life was perfect, right? So then my next experience here, I had this best friend, and we had been best friends for years. And one day, out of the blue, she says, I am so disappointed in you. And I was like, what? She says, you're supposed to be the spiritual teacher and you cannot even get your own life together. I'm paraphrasing, but that was the gist of it. I was supposed to be this spiritual teacher and I couldn't even get my life together. Well, you know what? I had trusted her to share my insecurities with her, to share where I struggled with her, because we all struggle at some point in our lives, right? And so now I knew why people don't want to share their insecurities and tell their true stories, put on this like charade, like life is perfect, because you never know when somebody's going to use that against you, right? You never know. So here I felt really betrayed, and I felt rather heartbroken. But the first thing that popped into my head was, if I only had gotten my act together, we would still be friends. If I only hadn't done this, if I only hadn't been weak in this part of my life, we would still be friends, right? I was putting it on myself. I had to get to a point where I learned about something called the human shadow. And I share this with you because I think it's important for all of us to pay attention to, okay? Recently I read this book called The Little Book of the Human Shadow by Robert Bly. And it's a great book. It's an easy read. It's less than 85 pages, I think, and I got through it in like 2 evenings. But Robert Bly says, every part of our personality that we do not love will become hostile toward us. Now, I share this because it's important to know this little bit about the human shadow when it comes to sharing our true stories, okay? Our shadow is hidden from us. It's in the shadow, right? We will be ultra sensitive to the qualities that are hiding in our shadow that we see in other people. We will actually have an irrational reaction to other people if we're projecting our shadow onto them. Because our shadow is trying to get our attention, right? So if we react in judgment or hostility, well, that's kind of irrational. And that just means there's something in our shadow calling out for attention. The things in our shadow are what pushes our buttons, okay? They push our buttons. For example, back in the early 2000s, I learned how to play guitar so I could accompany myself because I love singing. So I learned to play guitar and I had so much fun. I would go around to all these local psychic fairs or healing arts fairs, sometimes even little bookstores. And I would perform and I would sing all these wonderful songs that I loved. Well, one time I went to this event and they had another singer. And she went on before me and I was like, who is this person? Well, why did she sing like that? Well, she just wants attention from everybody. Why is she like acting like such a performer? I'm such a performer. That's not very authentic. Why is she doing that? Right? What I had to get to understand is that I was projecting my shadow onto her. I was projecting this need to be appreciated, acknowledged for my talents, and yet there was a sense of unworthiness, so I couldn't ask for this acceptance, right? Now, this projection, this shadow, okay, calling out for my attention, this part of my shadow, it followed me into my public speaking career. And I would go to events where there would be a lot of speakers. And I would sit through this event. Oh, is that talk going to be better than mine? Well, I have to watch this. Well, what if people like her more than me? What if he says something that is more understandable than how I can say it? Right? It wasn't until I acknowledged this, that there was this part of me crying out for attention, that I needed acknowledgement, right? That I was worthy to receive this acknowledgement. I was a good speaker. I was a good singer. Otherwise, why would I be invited to any of these events? I don't know. But see, I could not enjoy another person's performance. I could not enjoy another speaker until I acknowledged that in myself, because it would push my buttons. That's why I had an irrational reaction to them, okay, to watching them. Now, this is an important thing to know about judgment and observation. A judgment is a projection onto another person of our shadow, something in our shadow. An observation, we're just seeing something, but we're not reacting. So now I can watch another performer and I'll just think, oh, that was nice. I like that. Oh, I like that even better. Oh, that was really good. I wonder how they did that, right? I'm not like, oh, well, who does he think he is, right? Or who does she think she's, fooling, right? I don't do that now. I can go see other speakers and now I can enjoy the information they share, right? I can just take what interests me and leave the rest, right? So that's the difference between observation and judgment, right? judgment, there's a reaction there, right? So I just want you to know this, because say that you decide you want to share something with another person. And say that you're having difficulties with your boss, and your boss is, you just cannot seem to get on the same page with your boss, all right? And you're struggling at work because you're feeling like you're not being heard. So you tell a friend. Now your friend might react if they have their own relationship issues that they can't acknowledge. And so they might instead be judgmental. They might say, well, have you tried doing this? Well, why did you do this? Well, what did you think would happen when you did this? Right? And that's judgmental. And if that happens, it's going to make you feel bad. Okay, if your friend or whoever you're confiding in, if they respond with judgment, it will make you feel bad. In fact, when we share a true story with someone, a story that scares us to share, a story that makes us feel vulnerable, that is about our insecurities, if we share that and we are met with judgment, it is very likely we will experience shame and embarrassment at having shared that. This is another thing that's really important for you to know. If you share something and somebody responds with judgment, please remember it is their shadow projecting onto you. It is that part of them that they are not able to yet acknowledge or handle, okay? Blame, shame, reprimanding people, that is always going to increase the distance between us, okay? It's always going to increase the distance between us. Recently, I had an experience where I was struggling with a heavy emotional burden, and I reached out to somebody I thought I could trust. I was met with a laundry list of things I needed to do to fix my situation. I felt so ashamed. I felt embarrassed. I was like, why did I share that? Man, I should be able to handle this stuff on my own, right? I need to get my act together. That's what I thought. Reaching out takes a great deal of courage. And I wrote a poem called Reaching Out, and I want to read it to you, okay? Reaching out is a desperate act. It takes courage and willingness to trust that someone will see, hear, feel, understand, and reach back with kindness. But so often reaching out is met with, I'm busy right now, or let me tell you how you should do things, or you're the one that signed up for this, or, I've got problems of my own to worry about. Reaching out is a request for a life preserver, the last flailing act of one who is drowning. When you reach, and always reach for the light, not the stone that will pull you into the depths. And this is important to know. You want to keep reaching out. You might be tempted, if you are met with judgment, you might be tempted to shut down and never share again. But I'm begging you not to do that, okay? You will find somebody who can meet you halfway. You'll find somebody who can step into that story with you. Luckily for me, not too long after that, a friend of mine reached out to me who was carrying a heavy emotional burden. Now, my initial reaction was, oh, you just need to do this, this, and this, and fix this. But I thought about, luckily, thank God, I thought, God, that's just what happened to me, and it didn't help me at all. And so I decided to give my friend what I had needed so badly myself. And that takes consciousness. If we react, there's no consciousness in a reaction, because that's an automatic thing that just pops out, right? We want to be conscious of the next thing we say to that person. All right. And that helps us to get into a state of empathy. Now, empathy is when we step into somebody's story with them. So I stepped into my friend's story. I shed tears with my friend. And then I acted with compassion. You can't react with compassion. Compassion is always a conscious decision. But I was able to step into a space of compassion and just tell my friend how amazing and strong and how they would get through this, and I saw them doing hard things before and they managed to do that, and that I would be there and I would cry with them and I would hold their hand with them. And so that allows us to step into compassion. When we can step into somebody's story with them, have empathy, feel it with them, but then take a loving action. See, empathy is the gateway to compassion. And compassion is just us being able to take some sort of loving action that helps alleviate suffering. We don't have to be problem solving. That is not what compassion is. It's not problem solving. It is simply a kindness that helps with the suffering. For instance, if you have a dear friend who loses somebody they really love, there's nothing in the world you can do to just make all that pain go away, right? You can't do that. But you can alleviate their suffering with acts of kindness. You could take them some food, or you could offer to take their kids out to a movie, or you could, there are just little things you could do for the family, right? They're not huge life-changing things, but they're kind acts that go into the heart of that person. They know that somebody cares, and that will help to alleviate suffering. When we are able to step into another story, somebody else's story, and unite with them in compassion, well, that is a unifying experience, and it creates a sense of belonging. And right now, more than ever, we need that sense of belonging, that there is this ever expanding chasm growing between us, that to me, I see it mostly as political in nature, but that could also be cultural in nature or religious in nature. And it could be the smaller things like this kind of parenting versus that kind of parenting, or vegan eating versus meat eating, just organic, not, versus, fast food. There are a lot of things that can divide us if we focus on those differences. But when we're telling a true story, that allows us to connect with somebody. Now, I'll tell you, when I stepped into the story with my friend, when I gave my friend what I needed so badly, my friend did feel better. But you know what really shocked and surprised me? I felt transformed. So we can do that for another person too. So just remember, when you are telling your true story, be careful who you share with. For one thing, we have to be careful who we share our deepest fears and insecurities with, because they may not be able to handle it. But if you do share with somebody who responds with judgment, remember that it is not you, it is them. If they have a judgment toward you, they are projecting something from their shadow that they just can't deal with yet. They cannot face that yet. Also, when you are stepping into a story with someone else, right, and you're holding that sacred space for another person, acknowledge if you have judgments come up about that, about what they're saying. Okay, you can still be there with them in love and empathy and compassion. Just acknowledge the judgments that come up, because that might be something in your own shadow that is reaching, that is trying to get your attention and acknowledgement. A few years ago, I went on this intense diet and I lost a fair amount of weight. And then, after I'm down 2 sizes and I'm just feeling so great about myself, I was talking with another woman who was significantly overweight, and she was talking about her diet and eating a donut and telling me how hard it was to diet and that she was having a horrible day. And I was so self-righteous in my interior talk toward her. I didn't say anything. What I said to her was oh yeah, dieting's so hard. But I realized I was really self-righteous. And as I looked back on that, what I realized is that it was my shadow. There was a part of me that understood the shame of not being able to have a willpower, to keep eating healthy all the time, and feeling embarrassed that I couldn't stick with a healthy eating plan. And so I was projecting that onto her, because in a way it's if you would just succeed and not eat that donut, that would be better for me too, right? See, even right now, I'm thinking why did I even share that? Because that's an embarrassing story. But I'll tell you, I shared it because I want to be authentic. I want to be authentic with you. I want to be honest and authentic with myself, right? I want to create deeper connections in my life. I want those true connections. I want to be part of a tribe of belonging. And I think we all do. We just have to be able to trust that somebody can meet us in our story and hold the space for us while we go through that. Just like we want to be able to step into somebody's story with them and hold that space for them too. So I hope that there was something here today that was helpful for you. And just remember right now that you are the divine expression of a loving creator, and you are a force for good. In everything you do, you are blessed. You do not walk this path alone. And so it is.